First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to this wonderful festival. Congratulations for 10 years. I'm very sorry that I cannot join you in Taiwan personally. So I say hello from here, from my home studio, and yes, I wish all the best. Animation movies I like very much. Being a student, I composed and played saxophone solo for a friend's animated short film, a study work of him for his studies at the State Academy of Fine Arts in Stuttgart. Later on, I focused more and more on performing and conducting film music, less composing. One of my favorite soundtracks which I conducted and recorded was a movie about Albert Schweitzer's life in Africa. The music was composed by Colin Towns, who combined Western classical orchestral elements with African percussion and choirs. Wonderful score, really impressive. I also conducted concerts where Pixar film highlights were accompanied by live orchestra. These scores are very difficult to play, very virtuose. In Ratatouille, for example, the tempo is often changing from accelerando to ritardando and vice versa. The film synchronicity with a big symphony orchestra, that was a real challenge, but a challenge I liked a lot. Another movie which impressed me is Paul Grimaud's Le Roi et l'Oiseau, a French animation film, a real masterpiece. The director, Paul Grimaud, asked the Polonian composer Wojciech to write the music, but he gave not a single instruction. What a luck! The result was a very autonomous soundtrack which fits at the same time perfect to the movie, but gives the composer's own statement to the action, besides the film pictures. At the annual Festival of Film Music in Halle, Germany, I'm leading, together with my colleague Benjamin Köthe, a masterclass for film and orchestral scoring. Last year, the students had to write a 5-minute sequence to the animated movie Fritzi, eine Wendewunder-Geschichte. The film had been chosen because of the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. This movie showed the time before when people tried to escape from the German Democratic Republic. The sequence was a very dramatic scene where a young girl tried to escape from Eastern to Western Germany across the wall. I was deeply touched by the differences of the students' music sounds. They composed very different music to the same scene. This is a difficult situation, indeed. The director has certain ideas about how the music should sound, and he commissions a composer to put his ideas into tones, as often the case. Then the director adds temp tracks to his film and asks the composer to compose them. The most famous example is Stanley Kubrick's science fiction masterpiece 2001, A Space Odyssey. Kubrick commissioned the famous film music composer Alex North to write the soundtrack. However, after Alex North did it, Kubrick didn't like the music at all, so he used his own music compilation. That's the director's point of view. On the other hand, 10-track process limits the composer's creativity, certainly. In addition, an important voice of a film is lost. The composer, through his music, can open up a further perspective to the plot, similar to the way music often opens up a further dimension to the sung plot in an opera. However, there are also teams of directors and composers who really work together artistically. The composers can work independently of a musical template then. He only depends on the edited film. This happened between Steven Spielberg and John Williams. And the third variant is the composer's absolute freestyle. There are films in which the film was cut to the music. Oliver Stone, for example, edited large parts of his film JFK to the music of John Williams. To me, the most important thing in working together is trust and mutual respect. If a director believes in the artistic power of music and its composers, a film only can win. A composer, he's the expert for music, and of course, he knows even more possibilities and dimensions of music than a director, even if many directors have a different perception of it. Sound recordings with orchestras are very challenging. It makes a big difference whether a band or chamber music ensembles makes recordings. It can take a lot of time. Or whether a large symphony orchestra has its fixed schedule for recordings. As a rule for an orchestra it takes 3 hours per session, including a 20-minute break. With my team I manage an average of 12 to 15 minutes of music in one orchestra recording session, depending on the difficulty of the music, of course. It is very important that the recordings are well planned. For an orchestral production we need the composer who has often created a mock-up of his music and attached it to the film. Possibly the composer passes the result on to an orchestrator who arranges the music for an orchestra and produces the orchestral material. Many composers don't write scores, but create the music by using samples on the computer and then pass the files to an orchestrator who uses them to write scores for the orchestra and the conductor. The orchestrator can also be an important support for composers, especially composers who have little orchestral experience. May write sections that are difficult to play for certain instruments. I have often seen young composers copying the fast, virtuoso passages typical of John Williams, but chose the wrong key and unfavorable chord breakings and scales, which made it almost unplayable for the strings. The composer therefore must know exactly how to write for the instruments. It is important to check the sheet music for errors. If mistakes have to be corrected during the recording session, this costs precious recording time. To fix a good production plan is another important element. When are which takes recorded in which order? If I have 10 minutes of recording time left at the end of a session, I have to choose a short take that I still can manage, for example. In order to create a good atmosphere with the orchestra, the producer and the conductor have to consider the perspective of the orchestral musicians. If there is too much waiting time for individual musicians, for instance, because they are not occupied at the moment, it worsens the atmosphere. Another thing, when pop songs for bands are recorded or soundtracks for films or games, click is usually used. In the past, only the conductor had click, but nowadays the entire orchestra plays with click. This allows the conductor to concentrate more on the music, the phrases and the musical dramaturgy, and he does not have to strictly beat the beat. That's a very interesting question. Honestly, I don't know. First of all, I love music, almost all kinds of music, and I'm passionate to get to know new things. I also try to find connections between my teaching job as a professor and my diverse jobs as a freelance musician. Often I ask students to take part in my various projects. 2015 in Taiwan, when the GermanPops Orchestra performed with Soda Green, I also integrated some students from my University of Music. That way, I tried to offer the students experiences outside the school. Also, my experience helps me a lot. After almost 30 years of working in the field of music, I'm able to get the composer's idea and the essence of his music very quickly. I hope so.